Hi, thank you for joining us. This is the Mindset Podcast. I'm Christopher Feltner, training architect with Ukeru Systems, and you are joining us for a benchmark episode, episode number 20. It's hard to believe that's been 20 episodes already. I feel like, even though it's been a while, I don't feel like we've been doing this that long. We do have a special guest with us here today, as usual, but before we get into introduction, I was just doing a training in South Carolina, and someone asked me a question that honestly stumped me at first because I'm so used to answering challenging questions, but this person asked one that should have been simple. We are going through the website, talking about the podcast, and someone said, I really enjoy all the podcasts, but which one would you recommend as a starting place for someone? And I was at a loss. I had to really think about it. I brought up the episode list and everything. And then I was thinking it would be great if there was one that I knew I could point to talk about, mindset before and really get into meat about implementation and things like that. So then our guest today, I got confirmed as someone we're going to talk to. And I started reading Alex and his team's case study that they just did. And I feel like the answer to that staff's question at that training arrived at my desk. I was like, this will be the perfect place, the perfect person to talk to about all of that. So without further ado, if you would, introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, what you do.
My name is Alex Letto. I am one of three district-wide behavior specialists, special education district of Lake County. Um, I'm also the Ukeru coordinator, so I run Ukeru, most of the trainings. Um, but SEDOL is a special education district out of Lake County, Illinois. We have 31 school districts that we partner with in the Lake County area to help serve the students that have special needs, have a little more support needed, and we serve those students. 600 students here at CEDAL, but we help around 1,000 students around Lake County. We have about 600 staff member here at CEDAL. So if I believe, we're also the largest cooperative program in the state of Illinois. So it's a pretty large organization, and we do a lot of amazing work, and we have a lot of experts.
So when you talk about, some of the difficult behaviors served in your settings, like for someone who's just kind of learning about what this field is and all, describe what that might look like. Like, what are some of the difficulties that some of your students and all may exhibit or face?
Yeah, so at CEDAL, we actually have many different programs. For example, like our Gages Lake School is our therapeutic day school. That's mainly elementary age students, but there's an SAB program, Shaping Appropriate Behavior, and that can go up to high school age. And then we have SIDLASH, that's our high school therapeutic day school. Our Laremont school is for the more medically fragile students. Um, our John Powers school is the deaf and hard of hearing. And then Fairhaven, that's for the more severe autism um, students. So all of our programs, we have a variety of different challenges and
Mm-hmm.
behaviors. So it can range from students shutting down and sort of isolating themselves to more extreme risk behavior of um, self-harming to throwing objects around rooms or at people.
Gotcha. So before implementation, before you went to training, what what was the path that led you all to even think about doing Ukeru?
Yeah, so leading up to getting Ukeru was COVID, was the
Mm,
pandemic. And post the pandemic, we saw a lot tick of aggressive behavior and just behavior as a whole. And the staff and students, you can feel were getting stressed out. There was a lot of tension in the air. There was a lot of trauma. And the leadership here at SEDOL brought Ukeru to a group of people, and we felt that it was a good alternative to that other option, that restrictive option. So we came with an open mind and we went with it.
Gotcha. So I definitely want to get into some of the just crazy awesome results you all had and the programs you just mentioned, a lot of them. But one thing I thought was interesting, so I was traveling with Allison, who I believe did your all's initial training.
Yeah, she's actually done both of ours.
Oh, okay. And so me and her, we were the ones that went down to South Carolina here this week and we're training. So we've got 7+ hours one way to do a lot of talking. So she was talking about CEDAW and she's like, yeah, it's amazing. She's like, I remember like that was one group that gave me a good run for my money. It's like they didn't believe, like they wanted something, but they weren't quite sure that they believed that this would work in their program and stuff like that. So like speak from that perspective. Like what was your thoughts going into the training and then like what changed?
Yeah, there was a lot of skepticism going into that training. We all went in with an open mind and we were willing to need help. We needed something to help students and help staff.
Hmm.
But we were definitely skeptical of Ukeru. I remember we were having conversations with staff, and people were like, "What are we gonna do? Run around with these pads? Like, are we gonna just allow students to punch us and kick us because we're teaching the students the wrong thing?" Um, there was some thoughts like um, just some of the behaviors we have. Is a blue pad even going to help our students? Because
Hmm.
if it's not, and it's only going to escalate behavior, well, then we have a new problem on our hands.
Hmm.
So we went into that training very skeptical, and yeah, I'll be honest, we definitely challenged Allison, and kudos to them because they did a great job. They really did. And it really wasn't that far after that training where we had an entire staff buy-in. I would truly say about 2 weeks of implementation, we really saw the positive effects of Ukeru. And now we're here.
Right, right. So let's talk about implementation. So you've gone through training, right? And the reason I really want to get in deep with this a little bit is if people don't take the time to do implementation thoughtfully, I feel like they make mistakes, then they end up have to go back and do the things that should have been done at the beginning. So if you would kind of take us into that process, like, okay, you finished training, then what? What were the different things you did before you went live with it?
So we had about a group of 10 people originally get trained. Um, And after the original training, we met with that team plus our CEDOL leadership
Hmm.
about 2 times to just kind of really understand how we're going to bring it into school, how we're going to contact all our, make sure we kind of had our foundation. And then about a week or two after those meetings, and we knew really how to roll it out, we first brought it into the classrooms. We didn't implement it in any way in terms of therapeutic responses. We just allowed the students to interact with it. We allowed the untrained controlled and regulated way so they understood what these were for. And then about 2 weeks after that, um, we started implementing in a more therapeutic way. Um, so what we did in terms of the pads is we just put the pads in the hallways. We didn't hang them up. We didn't put them in a room. We just made it very visual for our students and staff. That way, it wasn't brought out during an aggressive episode. It was just used in their day-to-day life. It is a part
Hmm.
of their program. It's in their classrooms, it's in the hallway. They
Hmm.
sometimes just lay on it like a pillow. Like, it's fine as long as they're safe with it.
Yep.
So it was a very interesting and cool process because of that, because we didn't just get the pads and immediately go into a crisis. We really wanted to make sure that the students were comfortable and the staff that was not trained at least had an idea of what they were seeing.
Hmm. And I think that's, if there's one thing that gets skipped over the most, it's orienting the pads to who you serve, right? Because I feel like, well, it's not a feeling. I've seen it. We've been doing this for over a decade for places, and only four places have had issues in their first year where the blocking, they were having trouble implementing it, and they all had the same thing in common. They put pads out, but they never explained them in any way to the individuals. So, you talked about putting the pads in the hallways, but not using them to start, so people got used to seeing them. Uh, what were some other ways that you all kind of proactively got your folks used to them?
It was mainly just having team meetings with staff
Hmm.
that felt maybe uncomfortable with it or maybe were still skeptical. They did come to the trainers, the SEDOL Ukeru trainers, and they did ask questions. And then they were asking to be trained, even if they were skeptical. So they would experience it. Is it really what um, this great tool, or is it
Hmm.
just these Ukeru trainers just, pumping it up to make it seem great?
Right.
Because, like I mentioned, the CEDOL trainers, we bought in pretty quickly once we started to utilize it. But the staff that wasn't utilizing it definitely were still skeptical.
Yeah.
So they were asking to be trained as soon as possible.
Mm. Was there any, did you see any hesitancy with staff first being willing to try to block?
There were definitely some staff, all amazing staff, all great
Hmm.
intention. There were definitely some staff that didn't want to pick up the pads just because they felt it was silly, or it wasn't going to do anything for the student. And
Hmm.
or maybe I'm just speculating here. Maybe they were embarrassed because now they're just holding a big blue pad.
Hmm.
But fast forward, I see all staff, even those skeptical staff that didn't want to pick up the pad, they do pick up pads and um, they utilize them often in many ways.
Awesome. What about for your students? What were some things that were effective in helping them get used to them?
Anytime you don't put hands on anybody, I think they respect it and like it, even if they
Hmm.
don't tell you. Nobody likes to be restrained. Nobody likes to have anybody put their hands on them.
Hmm.
I think just in a general sense, after a Ukeru event, they wouldn't isolate themselves. Staff wouldn't isolate themselves. We would come together and we would more talk rather than react.
Hmm.
So I think that's the biggest thing that the students found is that we were here to support them, not control them.
Hmm.
And also, I think with that, staff became more creative.
Hmm.
So I think students felt more free of expressing what they needed.
Hmm.
Just a quick example, like when we first implemented this, a student, again, I'm very much fast forwarding the story, but a student
Hmm.
went from having aggressive behavior to building forts with pads in the hallway. And that I don't think that ever would have happened unless we had the opportunity to take a step back, allow the student to get their behavior out and become creative.
Hmm. What about as far as using the philosophy of comfort versus control and the bowling point concept and all those different things? Um, was any of that a mindset change for folks?
Yeah, 100%. I think we are definitely, it's what we really try to do is provide choices. A lot of
Hmm.
what behavior is a feeling of loss of control, whether
Hmm.
it's internal or external. So if a student or staff, whoever, if they start feeling a loss of control, they're going to do anything they can to control the situation. So if that's through their behavior, then that's going to be through their behavior. So I think it's for staff, it's mainly about providing safer alternatives to an unsafe behavior. So if a student's going to refuse a math worksheet,
Mm,
rather than eloping out of the classroom or getting physical with people because they want to avoid that work. Maybe we can just offer them choices. You can sit with a, you can have a safe body in the break area, or you can
mm,
read a book at your desk. And I think having those choices and for the student having a little bit more control, I think does help them. It's still
mm.
sort of, my way or my way. You're gonna the math work or you're gonna read a book, but it's a safer alternative. It's something preferred activity for that student, which isn't
Right.
a bad thing.
No. Well, it's kind of like what we talk about in the comfort versus control section. If they can't have this, do this, go there, offer things they can have or do or places they can go, because and make sure it's something they might actually like. Don't offer something that so crazy that they wouldn't go for it. They'd be like, well, I offered options.
Like, again, just a super quick example. I was talking with a staff member. We have some of our students love music. They love listening to music on their Chromebook, but
Mm,
the music currently in the situation isn't exactly appropriate. So the music was turned off. Instead of just having that power struggle, I offered to the teacher, maybe you can play music, but maybe you can control the music. Maybe that student needs music to help focus, but if it's not going to be appropriate music, then how about we play music, appropriate music via the teacher? So
mm-hmm,
it's we're being flexible, but we're also being direct at the same time, setting
mm-hmm.
expectations.
Well, I think people underestimate the utility of music for people in general. But I do like how, because we've seen that as well with a lot of folks we serve. The music that they choose at times hypes them up in the wrong way or has the undesired effect. Like I've learned from me, because a lot of times we're driving home late from the airport back home an hour, hour and a half. And I have learned that even though I like heavy discordant music a lot of times, if I listen to it at night for whatever reason, it puts me to sleep at the wheel. So it drives my coworkers crazy when I listen to soft minor key music driving home at night, but for some reason I could stay awake listening to it. So kind of finding, yes, I need to listen to music because I get too bored otherwise, but the right type of music for this situation.
Right. And we also have to think, especially with students, with children,
Mm-hmm.
and of this day and age and how they learn, how they keep attention, with
Mm-hmm.
all the different things that you can do and all the students don't sit down and look at a teacher and focus that much anymore. They have to be
Mm-hmm.
listening to something, they have to be watching something or doing something, but it has to be appropriate with what they're doing.
Right, right. So I want to go back just a little bit. You were talking about some of the questions folks had, like, are we going to just run down the halls with these pads, or are they going to encourage aggression and things like that? And that's common questions we get in training. So answer the question of, won't these pads encourage them to be aggressive? What has been your experience?
I haven't experienced it. That's my answer. I have never experienced where I've been holding a pad and punching me. And even when a student is unregulated, just grabbing a pad doesn't immediately make them punch. They have to reach a certain point. And typically, when you're de-escalating a crisis, it doesn't even have to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when that student is in the classroom throws the pencil, typically I just put the work to the side and let's go for a 3-minute walk. I don't wait
Mm-hmm.
until the student flips the desk and starts getting physical. I might have the pad in my hand, but we're going for a walk. We're not using it in an aggressive way. It's just a safety tool.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had the question in training? Because this is a common one I get. Well, in the real world, if they do something they're not supposed to, people aren't going to put out a pad. Do you ever get that question?
I haven't gotten questions too much like that. But at the same time, my answer would be we're working with children. We have to teach them the skills necessary in order to be independent people, to be successful people, productive people in society.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm a neurotypical person, as a kid, I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to behave in every situation. So
Right.
I would rather hold up a pad than, you know, put my body at risk.
100%. Well, that's actually a nice little segue. Better to use a pad than you try to use my own body to deal with aggression. You all have had wonderful results and stuff that, I definitely want to talk about here from your case study, but have you seen any difference in staff injuries?
100%. Even just myself, speaking for myself, um, going back just 2 years, I would often walk away with bruises, soreness, scratches, uh, you know, just many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And not just saying this. I rarely get injured. And I mean like scratches or any type of injury, low level or extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that with staff as well. It is with the added layer of protection, um, the injuries are definitely less severe.
Nice.
I think the worst that can happen is tripping because sometimes you don't know where a pad is or you're supposed to, but that's when the communication of your team really helps.
Mm-hmm. What about documentation? How do y'all capture? Because, like, you have all this data. How did you, like, you have clearly data for the restraint reduction, everything. How do you all document the use of Ukeru blocking itself?
So, in terms of RTO, restraint timeout, isolated timeout, there's state
Mm-hmm.
paper that we have to do. In terms of Ukeru, there's no state paperwork that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when there is a behavior, we typically document that behavior, whether it's a district level or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And within those notes and those documentations, we do add that Ukeru is utilized,
Mm.
but for the most part.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious about that. As you started seeing your numbers of restrictive practices going down, uh, did you all do anything to kind of, I don't know, reward or incentivize staff for going in the right direction with things? Like, were there any kind of like celebrations or anything?
I think there wasn't like a parade or anything like that.
Right, right.
But I think every day, at least myself, I remind staff of how well we're doing. The last few weeks, actually, since we've really compiled all these stats,
Right.
uh, all of my Ukeru trainings and all of I do another training things that I do bring up the success that we have. I do bring up the case study that you guys just did. You guys did a Gages Lake case study as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I do bring up the success, and I often give the kudos that the staff deserve because although in the pads, it's the positive relationships that we're gaining with our students, and that is via the trauma-informed approach of you.
Right.
Um, we had positive relationships and that trust, but I don't know if we really understood the power behind a positive relationship and the trust,
Yeah.
especially with a student and a staff member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, I think sometimes as staff, it can be easy to forget that you may be the only positive person in their life in some cases.
Yeah, I say that all the time, and that's why consistency is so important. Consistent staff, consistent expectations, consistent behavior. If you're not consistent, that student might be going alone for the next until like late at night or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the staff at school very often is the safest and most consistent adult in the going
Absolutely.
back to that question that statement real quick, amazing safety tool, but without the staff, we wouldn't be able to implement the trauma-informed approach. So
Right. A tool is only as good as the people using it.
exactly, and we can
Right.
see stats. Our SEDOL staff is amazing.
Yeah. So let's get to some of these wonderful statistics here. So you mentioned some of these places. So remind me again, Gage's Lake School. What type of school is that?
So the mainly elementary age students, and that's where you have our students that have a lot of the social emotional learning difficulties, where
Hmm.
you get explosive behaviors from time to time, whether that's verbally or physically.
So 90, almost 95.9% restraint reduction there.
It's amazing. What that staff has done has been incredible.
Well, and it's funny because when we talk to places that are kind of skeptical, and especially when you go to conferences and you're talking to hundreds of staff, I feel like it depends on who they serve. Like the ones that serve adolescents and adults, they're like, oh, I'm sure that works for those small kids, but we've got these big kids that are 6'6", 300 pounds. They make them sound like, you know, master level black belts in life. But interestingly enough, statistically across the board, US, outside of the US, the lion's share of restraint use is on young, small children.
I don't know the exact numbers, but again, my experience, it's first grade to fourth grade.
Hmm.
Young students, they have a very difficult time self-regulating
Hmm.
and being able to control their body when they're unregulated.
Hmm. Well, and honestly, I think a lot of times, and I'm just talking just in general with it, I think it's easier. They're smaller, I'm easier, or I'm an adult, you're a kid. I'm not going to take that. But when they are your size or bigger, suddenly you're like, well, let's talk about this. Let's take some time and talk. Suddenly they're all ears with it. Um, so yeah, that's amazing there. Tell me about Fairhaven School.
Very called our Lasso 3 program. Lasso is just students that have a diagnosis of autism. And that's the more severe autism program where more one-on-one support is needed. Many of those students are nonverbal, and there are some explosive behaviors at times.
Hmm.
And again, that staff is incredible as well. I think 99.2% decrease.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, that staff is incredible. And Ukeru has very much um, help that staff and those students safe, create a calm and safe and calm atmosphere. And in terms of just our CEDOL students, I think our Fairhaven program is the best program where UCARU is utilized. And what I mean by that is those students, when you have severe autism, it can be very difficult to
Hmm.
control your body when you're unregulated. So those students very much benefit off Ukeru. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is self-injurious type behavior. But with these pads, we're able to keep those students and staff safe.
Hmm. That's awesome. Now, tell me about the sector programs in Laremont School.
So our sector programs, well, I'll start with Laremont. Laremont is our a program that it has more of our medically fragile students. So some students are in wheelchairs, some students um, they just have a lot of medical needs. There's also a transition program with high school students. Um, That for the majority, you don't really see too much aggressive behavior, but there may be times where a student is unregulated and you may see that aggressive behavior. But for the most part, Laremont is more for the medical side. Like there's a lot of nurses over there who do amazing jobs.
Hmm.
So that's Laremont. Sector school, our sector schools are CEDOL classrooms that are in gen ed buildings. What I mean by that is there might be a CEDOL in a Lake County school district that is partnered with with SEDOL,
Mm-hmm.
but it's its own district. And that's where the students may be in a SEDOL classroom, but they get mainstreamed. They might be taking
Mm-hmm.
gym class or science class with the gen ed population, but they kind of have a home of a SEDOL classroom.
Mm. Okay. What about families of the students? How have they reacted to this program?
Yeah, from what I have heard, I think families have really taken to Ukeru and they really appreciate Ukeru. Um, In terms of training, I haven't been able to really talk to parents about training. I know more leadership does that, so
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak too much on that, but I do know that, you know, students and parents, guardians uh, like when you don't have to put hands on.
Right.
And the UCARE is an amazing tool for that.
Awesome. So, I mean, you all have had amazing results in the areas that you're using it. Like, where do you go next? Like, what's the next big goals?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of CEDAL, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
I think just continue this trend and continue to make sure our staff is well equipped to go into the schools, into the classrooms to really understand how to help our students. And I think, uh, UCARU is a part of our onboarding process. So we train staff before they ever go into our schools, into our classrooms, really into their roles until they have a better understanding of that trauma-informed approach. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when we do those trainings, um, I focus on a lot of like real world type relatable things. And I think that puts it in perspective and how and staff is easily able to see how kids are traumatized, how staff is traumatized, and
Mm-hmm.
why they're and under really truly understanding their behavior.
Awesome. Something I didn't ask about. I'm curious. Um, what does your all's debriefing process look like after a big incident?
Yeah, so for the majority of places that has Ukeru, like a part of their program, like our Gages Lake, our Fairhaven, most of our schools have the access to these pads, but it might be in like one classroom or one area of the school. But Gages Lake and Fairhaven have it all throughout. And those staff debrief when they're able to. They do find time to debrief, but sometimes it goes from a crisis to another crisis to another crisis, and you just can't sit down for 15 minutes and talk about it. So typically at the end of the day, they'll go over the main crises of the day, how we can improve, how we can help that student better. But
Mm-hmm.
also it happens throughout the day. If I have 5 minutes and you have 5 minutes, I might just talk to you about what happened so we can get on the same page in the future.
Gotcha. All right. Well, anything else you'd like us to know about CEDAW?
No, I think Ucaro is an amazing tool, and I think if you're able to make it relatable, um, just a quick example, like a lot of um, when you understand a student's mindset, I think you really understand that they spend a lot of time in that hindbrain and not the forebrain.
Yeah.
I, I think they're in fear rather than they feel calm and safe. So I think when you give real life examples in UCARU, you can really put staff in the right mindset to understand a student. A quick example is like walkie-talkies in a school, an environment,
Mm-hmm.
and announcements in a school environment. That's very triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Not just what you experience, it's also what you witness that is trauma. So, how many people can go online and witness a school disaster, and
Yep.
it involves a walkie-talkie, it involves announcements, running in the hallway, panic. So, I think understanding that and then how we approach that crisis is so important because just how we approach it can traumatize and scare a student
Mm-hmm.
and staff. I think that's
Right. 100%. Well, cool. Well, Alex, we did it. this was this was a very easy conversation. It was great getting to meet you. I haven't had the pleasure of getting a trainer talk with you before, so I appreciate you taking the time.
thanks for having me. This was cool. This was very cool.
And thank you all for joining us. This was episode 20. And now I have a good answer. If there's a good starting episode, the episode with Alex at SEDOL, that's the one. Take care, y'all.